AC Shadows is polished and confident in the opening act. The world is gorgeous, stealth is functional, and combat is crunchy enough to stay entertaining. And the setting does a lot of heavy lifting in making exploration feel worthwhile. But as a full completion run, it exposes the series of core problems, scale outpacing meaning. Optional content is abundant, but too much of it is templated. Activities repeat with different aesthetics, and the game rarely offers new mechanical questions past the midpoint. Narratively, it has some strong moments, but the broader structure is too familiar, and a lot of side content exists to extend the time rather than deepen character and consequence. Achievements and completion tasks lean into that padding, pushing you into hours and hours of low value cleanup. Borderlands 4 still nails the basic loop: shoot, loot, respec, repeat. Gun feel is strong, buildcraft is fun, and the game is engineered to drip feed dopamine through constant gear upgrades. Where it falls apart is the back half. Enemy density rises, but tactical variety doesn't, so optimal play becomes repetitive. In-game content leans hard on grinding familiar activities, and the story, while it has some moments, is rarely strong enough to carry that repetition. From a 100% perspective, this is one of those games where the achievement list reveals the design philosophy. It asks for time, for farming, for repetition, and far less for mastery. You can be good at Borderlands 4 and still be bored by what it demands. At 19, it's still enjoyable, but full completion makes its reliance on volume impossible to ignore. Ninja Gaiden 4 is combat as a stress test. It is fast, brutal, and mechanically demanding, and when you're locked in, it delivers an intensity few modern action games can match. The best fights feel like controlled violence, not button mashing. The downside is that the game is not always fair in how it sustains that intensity. Difficulty spikes can feel more like punishment than escalation. Some encounters are designed to overwhelm rather than challenge intelligently, and that makes late game endurance a factor in a way that can become exhausting. As a completionist, it also feels punishing because mastery requirements are not evenly spread. Some achievements demand genuine skill growth, where others feel like tedious repetition or perfect execution across long sequences with little room for error. Ninja Gaiden 4 earns respect for uncompromising combat, but the completion path is harsher than it is consistently rewarding. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4 is pure mechanical joy. Movement is expressive and momentum feels real, and the improvement is immediately apparent. Tony Hawk is one of the rare games where getting better feels like learning an instrument. What makes it land at 17 instead of higher is not quality, it's the depth of the experience. The structure is built around challenges and goals, and while those are excellent, the narrative and the world layers are minimal by design. You complete it because the mechanics are satisfying, not because the experience transforms the game. In terms of 100% completion, this is a fairly simple one. The achievement list generally aligns with skills, not grind, and the process of clearing everything teaches technique naturally. Cleanup feels like training, not chores. Tony Hawk sits here as one of the best designed completionist experiences of the year, but it does not have the thematic or systematic range to push it any higher. Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater is a stealth built on friction, hunger, stamina, camouflage, and awkwardness as design. Delta modernizes the wrapper, but the core is still about patience and improvisation, and that is what makes it so special. The systems are deeper than they look. They are constantly managing information, sound, sightlines, and resources, and the game rewards thoroughful play in ways most modern stealth games simply don't anymore. The story also holds up, melodramatic in the right way, but anchored by strong characters and memorable set pieces. Where it can drag is in repetition. A full completion run asks you to revisit content, and while replaying Snake Eater can be satisfying, some requirements feel like busy work layered on top of an already deliberate game. Battlefield 6 is its best when it produces emergent stories. You do not remember levels, you remember moments. The push that held, the flank that saved the match, the chaos that somehow became coordination. The problem is that this is not a consistent experience. Balance, map flow, and team composition can turn a session into magic or misery. And when you chase 100%, the grind becomes very visible. Weapon mastery and progression systems are designed to stretch engagement, and they feel like work when the match quality is not there. The campaign, where present, is usually not the reason people stay. The real appeal is the multiplayer sandbox, but completionist goals can force you into playstyles and weapons you do not enjoy, which undermines what Battlefield is best at. Chronos The New Dawn is survival horror built around constraint. Limited inventory, deliberate combat, and constant resource tension shape almost every decision you make. Early on, that restraint is effective. The game understands how to create pressure without relying on jump scares. The problem is longevity. Once you understand the systems, fear gives way to optimization. You stop making desperate choices and start making efficient ones. It's at this point where encounters start to lose their unpredictable feeling, resulting in tension flattening into routine of execution. Narratively, it is cohesive but narrow. Side content reinforces themes rather than expanding them, which works for tone but limits payoff when you're chasing everything. Achievements lean into risk management rather than mastery, which can feel punishing rather than rewarding. Ultimately, Chronos earns its placement because it commits fully to its identity. But unfortunately, that identity does not deepen enough to sustain a full completion run without repetition creeping in. Monster Hunter Wilds is built on mastery. Preparation matters, loadouts matter, and understanding monster behaviors matter. The game is at its best when it is teaching you how to read a hunt rather than react to it. From a systems perspective, this is one of the most rewarding games on this list. Progress is knowledge based, not purely numerical. Repetition is intentional because each encounter reinforces skill, positioning, and timing. The downside is time cost. A 100% run demands commitment and patience. And while the repetition is meaningful, it's still repetition, and the narrative payoff is minimal compared to the effort that is ultimately required. Wild sits at 13 because it's an exceptional mechanical experience that fully rewards mastery, but it also asks a lot from completionists. Citizen Sleeper 2 is a narrative driven RPG that prioritizes pressure over power. Dice rolls are not about success, they are about survival, and the game constantly reminds you of how precarious your position is. The writing is excellent. Characters are well realized, choices have emotional weight, and side stories meaningfully reframe the world. Unlike many other narrative games, here optional content is not filler. It is where much of the humanity lives. Mechanically, however, the systems do not evolve much. Once you understand how to manage resources and mitigate risk, later stages ask for execution rather than adaptation. Achievement cleanups can feel like retracing known paths for narrative completeness rather than discovery. Citizen Sleeper 2 earns its spot through writing and cohesion, even if the mechanics don't always deepen enough to fully match the thematic ambition. Doom the Dark Ages is combat distilled down to its most fundamental core elements. Every encounter is a test of movement, weapon cycling, and spatial awareness. The game is brutally honest about what it expects from you, and when you meet those expectations, it feels incredible. The combat loop scales well. Enemy design encourages full use of the toolkit, and difficulty escalation pushes skill rather than padding health bars. As a pure action experience, it is one of the strongest on this list. The limitation is variety. Outside of combat, there is little to engage with, and 100% completing the game means replaying arenas to mop up challenges rather than uncovering new ideas. Doom sits here just outside my top 10 because it is relentlessly well designed, but it's also deliberately narrow in what it wants to offer beyond combat mastery. Now let's move into the top 10 with Hades 2, which in my opinion understands repetition better than almost any game. Death is not failure, it's progression. Narrative mechanics and build experimentation all advance through persistence rather than completion. Systems remain flexible deep into the run. New boons, synergies, and story beats keep the loop fresh, and achievements often encourage experimentation rather than optimization. You are rewarded for curiosity, not just efficiency. The downside is that a full completion run is very long, and while the game supports that length well, not every player will want to see every permutation. Narrative pacing can also slow near the end, as remaining threads stretch even thinner. In Dying Light the Beast, traversal is the star. Movement is fluid, expressive, and central to how the world is navigated. Even familiar objectives feel different because getting there is a challenge. Combat and exploration benefit from this, but they do not evolve at the same pace. Enemy encounters repeat, and narrative stakes rarely escalate enough to justify the time spent clearing everything. From a completionist perspective, achievements lean heavily on traversal challenges and cleanup. While movement stays fun, repetition becomes noticeable once the world is fully mapped. At 9, the Beast earns its place because its core mechanics never stop working, even if the surrounding systems struggle to keep up. Ghost of Yotai is defined by restraint. Combat is deliberate, stealth is clean, and the world is designed to support a specific tone rather than maximal interaction. It knows when to be quiet. Narratively, it is focused and confident. Side content reinforces themes rather than distracting from them, and the game avoids many of the pitfalls of other open worlds. Bloat. The limitation is mechanical depth. Combat does not radically change across the experience, and while it remains satisfying, a 100% completion run rarely forces you to rethink your approach. At number 8, Ghost of Yotai gives you a completely coherent and competent open world to explore and live in, even if it doesn't completely reinvent the open world genre. The Outer Worlds 2 is built around consequence, and crucially, it follows through. Faction decisions matter, companions react meaningfully, and choices close off content rather than politely accommodating everything. From a systems perspective, combat and progression are improved over the original, but the real strength is narrative structure. Multiple paths genuinely exist, and completion requires engaging with those differences, not just replaying content. The cost is scope. Seeing everything demands multiple playthroughs, and not all paths are equally compelling. And some late game content feels thinner than early promise suggests. At number 7, The Outer Worlds 2 lands high because it respects player agency, even when it makes completion a little bit more demanding. At number 6 is Split Fiction, which thrives on variety. Mechanics are constantly introduced, reframed, and discarded. The game refuses to let mastery become complacency. Co-op design is absolutely immaculate. Communication matters, experimentation is rewarded, and optional challenges are designed to test understanding rather than patience. Achievement cleanup also feels playful rather than exhausting. Where it lacks, though, is within its emotional depth. While mechanically inventive, the narrative is light, and replay value comes from novelty rather than reinterpretation. At number 6, Split Fiction earns its spot for being one of the most consistently engaging games to fully complete of 2025. Silent Hill F is horror that survives scrutiny. Its imagery, symbolism, and narrative layering becomes more unsettling the more you understand them. Knowledge does not diffuse tension, it actually sharpens it. Combat is minimal and often awkward by design, but the game is not about mastery, it's about discomfort, and completion reveals how carefully its themes are structured and repeated. Optional content adds context rather than padding, and achievement hunting deepens interpretation instead of breaking immersion. And I can say from experience that very few horror games hold up this well when viewed through the lens of full completion. Death Stranding 2 doubles down on what the original did best, treating traversal not as downtime but as a primary verb. Planning routes, managing loadouts, and reading terrain are the game. It is slow, deliberate, and unapologetically mechanical. What elevates the sequel is refinement. Systems interlock more cleanly, tools arrive at a better cadence, and optional infrastructure projects feel genuinely meaningful rather than ornamental. A full completion run rewards understanding that space, not just tolerating it. The narrative remains divisive. It is earnest, indulgent, and sometimes overwritten, but it also is committed. Thematically, it aligns with the mechanics in a way few big budget games attempt, and that cohesion matters more the longer you play. Completion can be demanding, but rarely is it pointless. Tasks reinforce the core loop rather than pulling you away from it, and that puts Death Stranding at number 4 on my year's ranking list. A game that asks a lot, but also pays it back in fluency and intent. Hollow Knight Silksong is precision design at its most unforgiving. Movement, combat, and boss encounters are tuned to demand clarity of input and understanding. There is no padding here, only escalation. The brilliance of Silksong is how clearly it communicates improvement. Early failures are legible, later successes feel earned. Bosses are not beaten by numbers, but by pattern recognition, timing, and restraint. Mastery is visible in how you move, not what you have equipped. From a completionist view, this is one of the most demanding games on this list. Optional challenges are genuinely hard, not just time consuming, and achievements push you toward full mechanical fluency, and there are very few shortcuts. Narratively, it is understated, but effective. Environmental storytelling carries most of the weight, and completion deepens understanding without over-explaining. As my third favorite game of 2025, Silksong earns its place by making obsession synonymous with skill. Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is defined by confidence. It trusts implication over exposition and asks players to meet it on its terms. The visual design is striking, but it is the structural discipline underneath that sustains a full playthrough. Narratively, the game rewards attention. Side content reframes characters and themes rather than padding runtime, and key story beats gain meaning as you uncover more context. Completion does not dilute the experience, it actually exacerbates it. Mechanically, systems remain decision driven rather than grind focused, and progression is about understanding trade offs, not inflating stats. This is also seen within the achievement list, where achievements reinforce exploration and comprehension rather than repetition. For me, what holds it just short of taking the top spot for the best game of 2025 is its scope. The game is tightly authored, and while that focus is a strength, it also means fewer radical shifts across a full completion run. At number 2, Clair Obscur stands as one of the most cohesive and deliberate games of the year. And my personal game of the year, after fully completing 100%, seeing every single thing of 34 games released in 2025, is Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. KCD2 is one of the most uncompromising games I have ever played. It does not bend to the player. It expects you to learn, adapt, and endure. Competence is not granted, it is earned through friction. And every system reinforces that same fantasy. Combat rewards patience and positioning. Skills improve through use, not menus. And knowledge matters as much as numbers. Side quests are not diversions. They are how the world teaches you to survive within it. From a completionist standpoint, this is where the design truly shines. Optional content is not filler, it is texture. Seeing everything deepens your understanding of the setting, its people, and its rules. Nothing collapses under scrutiny. If anything, the game becomes more coherent the longer you stay. It is demanding, it is slow, and it is sometimes hostile to convenience, but it respects commitment in a way very few modern games do. As always, thank you so much for watching. On your way out, please remember to leave me a like, subscribe to the channel for more 100% completionist style content, and leave me a comment down below. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. See you soon.